turning the tide. As separatist control over vital but isolated supply routes expands, Republic forces invade a key planet, the darkened world of Umbara. In the midst of helping Obi-Wan Kenobi's battalion conquer the Umbaran capital, Anakin Skywalker is called away to Coruscant. His battalion is temporarily placed under the command of Jedi General Krell, a shrewd and temperamental leader. Krell's reckless strategy forced Captain Rex to retreat with his platoons in a disastrous defeat.
Greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mavar Tigar. Welcome to the 140th Krell Killing More Clones episode of Mandovision. Nargai Tom. And thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. Remember, the best way to find us is, of course, on social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing this show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. How is everyone doing? We are into part 2 of the Umbaran arc of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and it is just one of the best arcs of the series. Putting the clones in a situation where they are forced to examine their sort of blind loyalty to the Jedi, in a situation where they are taken away, the 501st removed from Anakin's leadership and put under the command of another Jedi who has a twisted outlook on the clones themselves and a twisted outlook on what the future of the Republic will be. As we'll get into that a little bit more as we continue down this arc. But this is just such a fascinating series of episodes. Again, I've always been a big fan of the clone-centric ones. And these ones in particular are some of the best, as the clones are put in a position where they have to question their leadership, the Jedi that they have been sort of trained and sort of trained. What's a stronger word than trained? But I mean, it's sort of like part of their DNA to follow the lead of the Jedi, to follow their orders and their commands. But to be put in a situation where they are forced to now question the decisions of General Krell. And the insanely high cost of the casualties, the amount of lives that General Krell's orders have cost. To put all that into focus is very, very interesting. So many great conversations between the clones here. D. Bradley Baker is absolutely on fire during this arc, as you know, he does what he does so well, which is to take a series of identical-ish looking characters and inject them with so much personality that they are distinct from each other, despite their outward physical appearance being very, very similar. And this arc in particular, that is a talent that really just comes to the forefront. Our cast is great, but D. Bradley Baker is definitely the star of this arc for sure. So yeah, we are here for The General, Season 4, Episode 8, original air date November 11th, 2011. The episode is directed with much energy and aplomb by Walter Murch, written once again by Matt Mishnevitz, and insane credit to Mishnevitz for this arc. It's just brilliant. It's so good. Our plot this week: Krell sends Captain Rex and his troopers on an impossible mission to conquer a heavily fortified Umbaran air base. I almost said ale base, which sounds delightful. I'd love to go to an ale base, but this is an Umbaran air base. Our voice cast this week: D. Bradley Baker is the Clone Troopers. Dave Fennoy, once again, is Pong Krell. James Arnold Taylor is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Tom Kane is our narrator. Again, this episode is so hyper-focused on the Clone Troopers that there's no need for a massive voice cast doing other things. You can only get in the way of D. Bradley Baker at this point and how much fire that person is on. He's just kicking all the butt. Our of Jedi Fortune Cookie this week, the Jedi Fortune Cookie is: the path of ignorance is guided by fear. And that sort of ties in. We'll talk about that expression in general, but we should also mention that on the last episode, I said we talked more about General Krell. We're going to hold off on that until the final episode of the arc, because it's hard to have a conversation about Pong Krell without going into sort of like the big reveals about him that happen later in the arc. So we're going to hold off on that, because if someone's path of ignorance is guided by fear, I suspect we are talking about General Pong Krell himself. But again, there may be some aspects of this that fall on Rex just a little bit here, and like how much of this is blind loyalty, and potentially being afraid of defying the General's orders going to get him and his clones into trouble. Rex makes his decision very clearly in this episode that he's going to follow those orders, but he's going to do it in the way that saves the lives of his soldiers, his troops, the people under his command. So, yeah, I think we're mostly talking about Krell with that Jedi Fortune Cookie for sure. But again, there's a little bit that it casts a wide shadow, and fear is something in a time of war that's something that has to be considered by all parties. And again, this is an episode, much like its predecessor episode, that is just so intense in the cost of war and the burdens of war, and just the sheer brutality of the war. We see so much death and destruction and carnage in these episodes. I mean, they really sort of underscore a level of darkness that we didn't get to see with the films, because, again, the films sort of bookend the Clone Wars, right? We see the beginning of the Clone Wars, we see the end of the Clone Wars. All this stuff in the middle, for an animated series, again, that was on the Cartoon Network and sort of geared towards a younger audience, the stuff we're seeing here is very intense. The Umbarans are relentless in their quest to defend their planet, to remain separate from the Republic, and the Republic's efforts to recapture it. And again, we're talking about resources, right? I mean, this is sort of something that's echoing activities in the real world right now. Again, we don't want to get too political on the podcast, or on Mandovision. We don't get too political on Mandovision, but yeah, I mean, it's hard not to watch a show about war and sort of see echoes of what's going on in our real world as well, particularly when it comes to resources. The Umbarans have Dunium, a major resource for the Republic in the building of ships, and they want that back under their watchful eye. So again, the echoes are there. I don't want to draw the conclusions. You know where to go with this train of thought, and see it for yourself. Again, is the Republic in the right for letting systems want to become independent? Excuse me, is the Republic in the right for not wanting to let systems become independent? The political machinations in the series run deep. And again, they won't get into it too much, because again, that's not what this show is necessarily there for. But that's what we can do on the podcast, is sort of talk about those things. And again, in theory, the idea of systems wanting to become independent from the Republic and leaving the Republic, yes, it's bad for the Republic, but maybe it's good for the systems, because we've seen the corruption that is the Republic. But again, there's a puppet master at play. There's a larger scheme involved here. We know that those systems are being manipulated. So again, like, you can't fault them, but they've been completely misled by Count Dooku and the other heads of the Separatist movement. But again, echoes of real life in this. It's just crazy. Just crazy, crazy, crazy. All right, let's stop talking about the real world. Let's get back into Star Wars, though. My goodness. All right, you know what we're going to do. It's time to dive into the episode. Again, we're going to talk more about Krell at the end of the arc. We're going to say that probably for episode 4. And probably after the episode, we're going to get into him, his motivations, and sort of like, again, we'll examine this fortune cookie in more depth there, the path of ignorance guided by fear, and Krell's fear, and sort of getting into like his sort of twisted psychology. I mean, for a Jedi, like I feel these guys shouldn't have passed the psych test. But but again, we'll save that for a later conversation. Let's go ahead. Let's dive into our episode. You know what that means? It's that time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
The capital city's too fortified. We need your battalion to help us take it.
Resistance from the Umbarans has been greater than anticipated. We're holding our ground at the moment.
We've gathered intel on an airbase to the west. It is resupplying the capital's defenses.
Incoming! Get down! Get down!
If you could capture that airbase, it will sever the capital supply lines, allowing the rest of our forces to move in.
I'll see to it that the airbase is placed under our control.
Remember, General Krell, the entire invasion depends on your battalion.
Captain Rex, have those coordinates mapped, and all troops ready to move out immediately.
Yes, General.
Picking up right where we left off in the thick of battle against the Umbaran forces, we now get to see Umbaran air forces raining holy heck upon the Republic forces, the clone troopers. And again, we're just in the thick of it, you know. People, so we were hearing clone troopers screaming, dying, getting blown up. Rex trying to issue commands, trying to like save as many lives as he can. We get to see some first aid, some battlefield first aid rendered. It's an intense sequence. And then just before that sound clip begins, what we see is as we sort of pan around from a ground level of the battlefield, of the scene around the clones, we pan around and then we see the big basilisk feet of General Krell as he uses one of his feet to sort of flip over and push away the body of a dead clone trooper. And he does it with sort of a level of disgust, of just like ickiness, like, ew, get this away from me. So again, that low opinion of the clones comes out without even a word being said. Just that specific action itself just sets the tone for what kind of bad general this guy is, and a bad Jedi at that as well. You again, I'm going to mention perhaps the Jedi should be doing some more psychological profiling on their Jedi on a more regular basis, particularly at a time like the Clone Wars, where many of their ideologies are being questioned and pushed in ways they didn't expect them to. Again, war does a lot to others. It does a lot to everyone. And the Jedi are no exception to that, even though we've seen some Jedi generals seem to do well and thrive in this environment. Others seem to be breaking in ways. Krell's going to be very, very different, and we're going to talk about that in the third or fourth, probably the fourth episode is when we'll get a little bit more into his psychology. But again, just his overall disdain for the clones is right on Front Street. It wasn't the last episode. It's in this episode. And that's what we get to see here. Except now the clones are starting to get sick of it because a lot of them are getting killed. These are their brothers, all right? This is not just, clones is such a sort of a diminishing word. These are soldiers, these are men, and they are dying. And Rex and Fives and the rest of the troopers, they're not going to stand for just being cannon fodder. Krell, we'll hear from Krell later. He loves a full frontal assault. That is his move. And it's not a good strategy by any stretch of the imagination. But now we hear from Obi-Wan, who's radioed in. Again, Anakin's battalion, when he was there, the 501st, they were sort of like the hammer for this plan. So they need to be the one to do a lot of the heavy lifting here for this operation. But now under the leadership of Krell, their forces are so diminished that I don't even know if Anakin's plan would work anymore. But now intelligence from Obi-Wan, from another source, has indicated there's an airbase. So it's time to move the 501st to take the airbase, cut off the supply line for defending the capital, which hopefully will then make the capital more vulnerable so that the Republic forces can move in and take it. It seems like a good plan in strategy, but Krell is he's not the leader that Anakin was. That is a certain fact.
There's a base there, all right. Indeterminately guarded. At least 3 tank divisions, plus guns.
We'll advance along the central gorge and engage their forces in a full forward assault.
The gorge is narrow, sir. We'll only be able to move our platoons in single squads. Perhaps a closer recon will tell us if there's a more secure route.
Obi-Wan and the other battalions are holding off the enemy right now while they wait for us to take out this base. We don't have time to look for a more secure route.
Yes, sir.
So again, you can hear it in Rex's voice. He doesn't agree with this plan. The full frontal assault is just going to be horrific. And after what the 501st has already suffered, as an entire battalion and then individually as platoons, it's just bad leadership from the top down, right? And Rex, again, he has to begin to question his ability to follow these orders that he knows are not good and are going to cost lives. So as he's relaying these orders to the men now, this is when we begin to hear like the first really big rallying of dissent. But Krell does have a few supporters as well. But we're going to hear. I want to play a big chunk of this section because, again, the clones having this conversation is so very, very important. Again, each of them making their own individual statements about Krell's leadership and how it affects them and how bad it is. Again, it's seen, they see it, but it's such one of those moments that we've seen in a ton of different war movies when your leader is making horrible decisions, and the chain of command is sort of designed to make it so that it's really hard to question those decisions, and that's what Rex is going to ultimately have to do in this episode, and there will be consequences. Let's check out the sequence here as the clones discuss the orders after Rex passes them down.
All right, listen up. We'll assemble the squads into 2 divisions. We'll move straight up this gorge towards the airbase at the far side. The casualties are going to be high.
Is Krell trying to get us killed?
I wasn't sure that Krell was crazy before, but now I'm positive. We had to retreat from the capital because the general pushed a flawed strategy. Now this? I don't know. Could be fun. Well, I, for one, agree with the general's plan. We're running out of time, and this is the best option. No recon, no air support. We don't know what we're up against. They have weapons we've never seen before.
Again, right there, another reminder that the Umbarans have developed their technology very differently from what we've seen across the Republic because of their isolation in that Ghost Nebula and being pretty removed. I mean, they are sort of along that Kashyyyk trade route, but they're still way off of it, again, hidden in that nebula. So they developed their technologies very independently, and their weapons are insanely effective, as we've seen in the first episode, and we're seeing in this episode as well. So that pointed out by the troopers is a very, very important thing to note as well. Now we're going to get to a part of this conversation that I really like and I think is really, really important, which is the way Krell leads the men versus the way that Anakin Skywalker leads the men. And by and large, the way that many other Jedi have led the men too. When we see a lot of the Jedis in action with their clone troopers, they are in the mix. They are leading them into battle. The Jedi are not asking the troopers to do anything that they won't do themselves. Krell, on the other hand, has another mode of operating, and I love hearing the clones point that out as well, so let's play that section.
A few of General Skywalker's plans seemed reckless too, but they worked. Yeah, but General Skywalker is usually leading his men up in the front, not bringing up the rear like General Krell. A full forward assault would leave us too exposed. We have to look at other options. It's going to be a meat grinder.
And now for the final section of this conversation between Fives and Rex, as Fives points out the amount of troopers that Krell loses under his command, and Rex has to point out a sort of flawed thought, a sort of flawed notion that in war this is the price that soldiers must pay, and it's something that we're going to hear Krell echo later on the show, which I think really is sort of the beginning of Rex's I've had enough of this guy, and so let's go ahead and check out this part of the conversation.
Fives. It would help if you eased their minds. What, you mean coax them into following another one of Krell's suicide missions? We lost a lot of men last time. Krell may do things differently, but he is effective in getting them done. He's a recognized war hero. He may have had some victories, but have you seen his casualty numbers? More troopers have been killed under his command than anyone else. That's the price of war, Fives. We're soldiers. We have a duty to follow orders, and if we must, lay down our lives for victory. You believe that? Or is that what you were engineered to think? I honor my code. That's what I believe.
So the troopers begin to follow their orders and execute General Krell's battle plan to take the air base. And things go awry very, very quickly as the Umbarans unleash more technology that the clone troopers have never seen before and have no idea how to handle. And that is these sort of a giant battle centipedes that are like segmented tanks that come out of the ground. There's like 4 or 5 of them, and they begin to just blow through the troopers. And make mincemeat out of them. It's a series of brutal weapons, brutal attacks. Again, the clones are on the defensive very, very quickly. But Rex has a plan to deal with them. We find out that the blasters and guns, I should say blasters and rifles, blaster rifles, hand blasters, pistols, whatever you want to call them. Jeez Louise, are pretty ineffective against these battle centipedes. So it's time to break out the rocket launchers, and you got to use some higher explosive things. Again, they're essentially tanks they're coming up against. They're not the tanks that we're going to see later in the episode. They're not quite that powerful, but again, these are pretty impressive creations of the Umbaran military. And Rex does have a plan, though, and let's listen to him execute it.
Safe for the moment. They'll be coming around any second. Bring up the launchers. Spread detonators along that corridor. Trap them into the bottleneck. We're gonna blow those things sky high.
And spoiler alert, the plan works. Rex and his soldiers are able to defeat those battle centipedes and begin to execute the next part of the plan. There's something really haunting about the way the troopers are walking amongst these now destroyed battle centipedes. And it's like something out of a war movie here. Like, you find one that's still functional and you blow it to heck, and you make sure you kill that pilot. And there's sort of like a cold, just a cold warfare aspect to that sort of thing. You also see those native creatures of the planet, scavenging, looking for dead soldiers to eat, and the clones' reactions to seeing like their fallen brothers become for comparison's sake, like, vultures picking at their bodies, and the way they sort of react to that. And then it's not very long that the next part of the Umbaran, the next layer, the next level of the Umbaran defense is an actual tank that is insanely powerful, ray shielded, and just outmatches them, outclasses them in every facet. And when Rex makes the call for assistance, for backup, for reinforcements, Krell, he's not having any of it.
What are they doing? Captain, continue your attack.
Sir, we're overpowered. We need reinforcements.
The rest of the battalion is holding the entrance to the gorge, Captain. They're guarding it so your troops can break through to the airbase.
Sir, we can't
You
possibly...
must stand your ground. Do you read me? Captain, are you listening? Do not fall back. That is an order.
So Rex put in a really bad position here, trying to do what his general is telling him to do, but the clones are just, they're being killed ruthlessly, mercilessly by the Umbaran tanks. And after that communique ends, that's the next sequence, is just clones by the dozen, soldiers by the dozen, men by the dozen being killed. And Rex is in this position. He knows these orders are terrible. He knows that they are wrong, but he wants to follow them because that's what he's supposed to be doing. It's the other clones who are like, are you out of your freaking mind? So let's go ahead and check this out, as he has to try and convince the troopers to move on, or he has to formulate another plan on his own and potentially go against Krell.
Keep the wounded as quiet as possible. All right, you heard the General. Let's go. You can't be serious. I used to think General Krell was reckless, but now I'm beginning to think he just hates clones. The captain is right. Now let's move out. We can't take them head on. We need to find another way. You got any ideas? Then this is it. Okay, let's do it.
So it's one more heroic charge from Rex and his men, but again, this won't be enough. and they know that these are bad orders. They know that it's going to cost them more lives. It's just it's Rex is in a hard position here, but he's going to be Rex at a certain point here, and we're going to get to that sequence in a moment where he has to formulate a way to actually achieve the goals that he set out to achieve with this mission. And again, maybe it's a little unorthodox and it's not by the book as Krell likes it. And again, there'll be consequences for breaking that. But at a certain point, Rex decides that this is what's best for the men. This is what's best for achieving victory. And yeah, it's just a really intense episode. I mean, there's so many things to consider here in this episode. The other men under Rex and the questioning all of this, like Fives in particular. We also see in this episode, I should mention that Apo is in this episode too. Apo is the member of the 501st, the clone trooper who leads the 501st into storming the Jedi Temple in episode 3. So, ... He likes to follow orders too. Then again, there might have been a chip in his head. We'll talk about those when they come up later. But yeah, let's get to the next big sequence here as Rex has to make a big decision here.
We're finished. We've still got some fight left in us, Tup. And I've got an idea. What were you thinking? Remember what you were saying about finding another way to destroy those tanks, yeah? Well, I have a mission for you.
CT-7567, where are you?
General Krell, we've come up with a plan to infiltrate the airbase.
What is your plan?
I've dispatched 2 men on a stealth incursion into the airbase. They've been ordered to co-opt starfighters and use them against the tanks.
You what? You put this entire assault on your hope that 2 clones can do what your entire group could not?
Sir, the rocket launchers don't work on these tanks, and it'll be easier to slip by undetected while the rest of us keep the tanks occupied.
Captain, you will launch a full forward strike immediately, or you will be relieved of duty.
We need to hold out as long as we can. I'm trusting Fives and Hardcase to pull this thing off.
So Rex is going to be in a fair amount of trouble for improvising, overcoming, and adapting to the situation instead of just following General Krell's completely horrendous, full frontal assault nonsense that's clearly not working, that they are completely overwhelmed and overmatched. And again, at this point, we sort of have to wonder about Krell. Like, what is his deal? Like, is he just the guy who has to give the orders and be right all the time, who must be followed? His orders must be followed at all costs for all beliefs, no matter what the stakes. Or is there something going on? Does he hate the clones, like Fives suggests early in their episode? Is there more going on to Krell than just this sort of follow me at all costs, no matter what? Never, don't question me. I'm the general sort of mentality that he has. Again, the path of ignorance, guided by fear. We don't get to explore that more with Krell until later in the series when we find out what's really going on with him. But the clones are beginning to question it. The clones are beginning to stand up for themselves. And again, Rex finds a way to do what the general wants, just not in the way he wants it done. Which, again, I find to be rather commendable in a soldier, being able to, improvise, overcome, adapt to the situation. But Krell has no time for it whatsoever. And again, there will be consequences later on, but we'll deal with those later. So in the meantime, we have Hardcase and Fives on a mission to get to the cell ships. And in an episode that is very full of dramatic tension and very full of stakes, just, again, so many troopers dying in these episodes. We get a brief moment of levity and a classic callback to a Han Solo line from episode 4. So let's share that real quick here.
I prefer a good fight to all this sneaking around.
Boom. Han Solo'd into this movie. Love it, love it, love it. So Rex and his platoon are holding off the tanks. They're causing a distraction, a diversion that's going to hopefully allow Hardcase and Fives to sneak into the airbase, which it does. Hardcase and Fives activate their detonators, causing a bigger distraction within the base, so they're able to sneak in to steal the fighters. Let's check it out how it goes. Again, Umbaran technology, extremely difficult. So a bit of a learning curve here for our heroes here.
So, how do I start this thing? Well, how should I know? Start pushing buttons.
right, this leads to a rather comical bit where Fives and Hardcase are attempting to figure out how to fly these Umbaran ships that are so vastly different from Republic fighters. It's all very I don't even know the word to use to describe them. I mean, it's like it's almost like holographic controls in a sense. You sort of put your hands in things, and then lights come on around them, and things happen to them. There's a visual heads-up display in the bubble that in which they exist in for the flying of these ships. They are not very good at flying these ships. It's kind of comical, but I like the fact that they're not very good at it. I sort of think that lends some sort of a dose of realism to this episode, in that this is technology far out of their hands. I mean, and they're not even pilots. These are ground troopers, all right? So them not even be able to kind of like make educated guesses about what does what to make these ships kind of work makes a lot of sense to me. And again, the technology is vastly different from the Y-wing bombers that we've seen in the earlier episodes, and even the other starfighters. Just insanely different. There's no control yoke to hang on to and to move around. There's no again, as Five says, there's not really any buttons to push necessarily. It's all sort of it's a much more intuitive design, I suppose, in a sense, because of these like sort of hollow controls and hollow displays they have in front of them. But wildly different. But it's going to be very, very effective against the Umbaran tanks once they're able to make their way out. And on their way out of the airbase, Fives and Hardcase do a great job of destroying the other Umbaran fighters, so no other ships can be scrambled to shoot them down and come after them and the rest of the 501st that's on the ground. So Krell seems fairly pleased at the results. He even says impressive, but as he's issuing the commands for the reinforcements to move in to secure the airbase and sort of get after things. There's this great shot of him that closes in on his eye, and we see the fire reflected in his eye, sort of highlighting his sort of love of the chaos that he's created through this plan. And again, it's something that we're going to dive into later on. We can't. I don't want to dive into Krell's end game here just yet. I think we should save it for that episode. But yes, I think that shot there underlies that there's something more going on with Krell than what we're being led to believe. He's not just this a results-driven commander who will sacrifice the lives of hundreds of soldiers to achieve his goals. There's more to it than that, and I think this is like sort of our first real glimpse. There's something sinister about him. And I mean, again, you can make the argument that he's been sinister since from day one, but that's sort of like the big revealing shot that there's more going on here, that there's a sort of underlying love of the chaos that he's sowing. So yeah, we'll talk about it in time. Let's catch up for the end of the episode as Rex and Fives and everyone are convening, and yeah, let's just let it play out.
Despite Hardcase's flying, you two saved us all. I wasn't so tough. You sure? You looked a little green when you came out of that fighter.
Captain, report. What is our situation?
General, we have taken the base and cut off enemy supply lines to the capital.
Luck has smiled on you today, Captain. Consider yourself fortunate.
It wasn't all luck, sir. A lot of men died to take this base.
The price for such victory. Perhaps someday you'll realize this. Dismissed?
He's the one who will never realize.
I love that shot as Krell says that about the price of victory, of Rex's fist tightening around his helmet as he's ready. He's had enough of General Krell, and I think all the clones have at this point, and they're going to be pushed to the brink in the next installment. But just another incredible episode in this arc in this show. Again, it's hard to argue that this episode is better than the first episode because the first episode is so great, but it is. I love this escalation and Rex being forced to reconsider the sort of blind loyalty of the soldiers, of the clone troopers. It's one thing to follow your general, but it's one thing to follow an idiot general into the worst situations possible. And they're not even following. Krell's safely at a distance, watching on his binocs or his quadnocs, depending on which ones they are. And he's not even risking himself in the least. And that's because he has an end game for this all himself. We're going to get there. We're going to talk about it. I feel sort of stupid not just diving into it because, again, I sort of make the assumption that we've all seen Star Wars: The Clone Wars before. But if by any chance anyone's out there listening is watching these as we go through these, I don't want to spoil something. So again, we will get to Krell's real motivations, his underlying reasons for doing what he's doing, and we are going to talk about them ad nauseum on that show. But for now, we're just going to play it straight. But yeah, I love Rex having to sort of confront blind loyalty to the Jedi and to generals and to superiors and sort of questioning the chain of command in a sense when they are doing stupid, horrific things that are costing your brothers their lives. It's just an incredible episode. And again, if I were to rate it, it's so close to 9.5. It's so dang close. It's a great episode. The Umbara arc might be one of my favorites because, again, you remove the Jedi from this equation, right? The Jedi that we know. You've taken Anakin off the board. You've taken, Kenobi's barely in these first two episodes. We're focused on the clones themselves and a Jedi general who's out of control. And it really allows us to see these characters in a different light than just, again, sort of like the blind, obedient soldier doing what the Jedi tell them to do. Outstanding stuff. It's so impressive. I love it so much. It's just phenomenal stuff. So woof, gosh darn the Umbaran arc. It's so good. This is just classic Star Wars at its best. And I know it's sort of weird to say, but I'm talking about a show that's over 10 years old, so I feel comfortable saying it. But yes, gosh darn it, this is hands down one of the best arcs of the show. And you'd be like, but it doesn't have Jedi in it. It doesn't have Darth Maul. It doesn't have Mandalore. And you're right. It doesn't have any of those things, and that does not belie that those are awesome, amazing arcs as well. But I love the clones getting to stand in the spotlight for a bit, getting to think about them as individuals, as people, as soldiers. It's so. It's not something that happens in insanely much in the show. Because again, we are hyper focused on Anakin and Obi-Wan and a lot of the other things going on, the mythology. But I love exploring the clones. I think they're just completely fascinating. So whenever we have a chance to dive into them and their unique psychologies, I'm always here for it. I'm always excited to be able to do that. It just delights me. All right, we're gonna get out of here. We got more Umbaran fun coming up your way. Woo! Just wait. We've got 2 more to go in this arc. Because it's so good. It's so good. Let's go ahead and thank the official Mando Vision Maniacs, which you can join over at patreon.com/MandoVision. You can join you can join your fellow Maniacs and gain access to the sweet bonus content. Thank you to our current Maniacs, the Aspinall Jody. Ooh boy, almost messed that up right at the get-go. The Aspinall Jody, the Batman Abejo, Jeff Nail, Jeff co-hosting the Ring and Era Great Music Podcast, so check them out. Thanks to Evil Circle, the evilest of all circles, the Squid Master General, Mr. Ryan Broussard, the New Jersey Devil, Mark Wegemer, our very own Joker and Harley Quinn, Brian and Krista of Pariah Brewing Company, here in San Diego, and now in Baltimore, Maryland. Go check them out. Go to their website. I think they're still shipping beers. If you're not in the area, I think they'll still ship to you if you want. The Beer Hop Brigadier General, Jesus Beer Hops, the Silent Assassin, he who shall not be named, and Syndicate Ram, co-host of Come On, It's Still Good, a great movie-based pop culture podcast that I think you all should check out, and that I might be hanging out with a little bit more often in the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. All right. One more reminder, we are on social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And otherwise, yeah, make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. If you have the time and the inclination, 5-star reviews. So helpful for the podcast and our quest to defeat the algorithm. Thank you for doing so. And you're the best. We love you. We love you so much. Let's get out of here. The Umbaran madness is just overwhelming me. It's time to go. I gotta catch my breath. I gotta catch my breath before the next one. Whoo! Whoo! All right. You know, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Bounty hunting is a complicated profession.